And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest today is Tatev, who had a near-death experience after being electrocuted. And today we're going to learn about it. Tatev, Thank you so much for being my guest and welcome.
Thank you so much for gifting me your time and inviting me to be your guest on your podcast.
You're welcome. All right, if you don't mind, let's start on that day that you were shocked and go from there.
I was maybe 13, I think, or 12. This was in Armenia, near a lake called Agharlich. I was born in a town south from the capital of Armenia, from Yerevan. So it's near Armavir. So I was born in Armavir, and a girlfriend of mine wanted to ask me out to join with her family to go for a picnic, swimming in the lake, barbecue, and so forth. And I have always been a bit of a rebellious creature, just not wanting to obey by the rules that I was given. And my mind has always wandered about things. You know, why am I being told to do this? Why is it more necessary for me to obey the rules, it seems like, more than what my peers of boys are being asked to do? Why do I have my father's last name but not mother's last name? Why can't I play there and not here? And so forth. So we arrived to the lake, and adults started preparing the barbecue. And so there was a gazebo, small gazebo, where we left the meat to marinate and so forth. And we would go quickly change to our bathing suits and go to swim. We as kids, my girlfriend and I, went to swim and came back. And then the adults realized we're safe and good. So it was kind of their turn to go to swim since the meat was marinating. And the gazebo had an open wire coming from, and a whipping willow, that branches of which were caressing the roof of the gazebo. So the open wire was wrapped around in some of the branches coming from above the roof of the gazebo and connecting to the bottom of the gazebo. So we turn on boombox and so forth. So we decided to play badminton, still with our wet bathing suits on. And I was like, oh, Armine, my girlfriend's name was Armine. Let's try to climb on top of the gazebo and just look at the view from on top of the gazebo, you know, just you know, so wanting to do new things, just view the scene from above. So I, on purpose, but then she was like, oh, but when our parents come out, what are we going to explain to them? Why did we climb on top of the gazebo? So I was mischievous. I was like, I'm going to throw the shuttlecock on top of the gazebo. That will be a beautiful excuse. Well, you know, go. So I threw the shuttlecock up there. And so we climbed up the gazebo with the help of, you know, one leg on the wall of the gazebo, one leg on the whipping willow. We got up there. And since the gazebo had a bit of a slope, and the triangular metal sheets that were covering the gazebo, whenever the triangular sheets would connect with each other, there was a little protruded section so that they connect. On one of them, my foot tripped. I didn't have slippers or anything on. I'm barefoot with a wet bathing suit, you know, like the worst scenario to be electrocuted. So my foot tripped on one of the metal connecting protruded parts, and so I didn't want to fall off the gazebo, of course. And the first thing that came to mind was just to grab the branch of the whipping willow. So I found it, but it turned out that it was the open wire, not the branch of the gazebo, because it was, you know, all intertwined and I couldn't see. And so, I mean, I don't know how much I want to go into necessarily the physical pains of it. It was an excruciating physical pain, but what's tremendously important and interesting to me is really what happened afterwards. But I gotta say, I want to mention that moment of, you know, when you grab an open wire, and this is, you know, in Armenia, where the voltage is like, what, 220? I think it's not like 110 here, I think. So
Yeah, I'm not
maybe,
sure.
yeah. So I mean, I got freaking fried, you know. So holding on to the wire was such an interesting experience, in the sense that it goes against your instinct. You want to let go of the wire, of course, but the more force you put towards opening your hand to let go of the wire, something 3 times, 4 times more makes you hold it even tighter. And so it's kind of against your intuition, because after doing it a couple of times, you realize it's hurting even more. It gets more inside your bone when you're trying to let go. So you kind of just, after a couple of times, I mean, my body, I suppose, could not handle the physical pain of it. And so I just shook and just fell on the roof of the gazebo. My girlfriend, thankfully, was clever enough not to, try to remove the, push the wire or anything, but she was screaming and I could hear her. So my body shut down because it wasn't able to handle the physical pain. And I remember blackness for a few minutes or however long that was. I can't explain. The next thing I do remember clearly is seeing myself on the roof with my girlfriend screaming my name next to me and crying. And I was slowly being lifted off away from my body, but I was very clear on what I was seeing. It's as clear as I can see the screen and your face right now. I was seeing I was drifting away from my own body. And those few moments were the most serene experiences, feelings I've ever had. I'm a musician, and so sometimes when we play music, that elated, transforming power of music, there are a few seconds where I can get the grasp of that, but it's very difficult to explain what it feels like with a human-made language. It's almost like being in a beautiful dream, in addition to being intensely in love, that elated feeling. There's no sense of gravity and there's no sense of time. No guilt, no frustration, no anxiety, nothing. It was the most incredible few moments of my drifting away from my own body. But again, I was fully comprehending what was going on. I was very aware of the fact that I left my physical body. And I do remember the only troublesome thought was that I comprehended what my mom, my sisters, and my dad would feel when they realized that I'm dead. And the only bothering feeling at that moment was, how do I let them know that I'm in a much better place than they are? And I remember that feeling so clearly, because everything else was fascinating and amazing. I saw the further I would go away from my body, the more upwards I would go, the more immersed in light I would become. There were lights, not necessarily circular, but spiraling of sorts, exuding out of everything, from trees, from poles, from things that we call breathing or non-breathing objects. Everything had its energetic flow that would somehow merge with me, and the more I lifted up and up and up, the more white light I would become. But I was aware of who I am. You know what I mean? Maybe the notion of like, no, my nose looks like this and my voice sounds like that started dissipating of sorts. I don't know what would happen if I stayed in that state longer than the 8 to 11 minutes I was gone. But what I experienced during that snippet was that I was fully capable of understanding my sort of spiritual or intellectual capacity of who I am, regardless of the fact that I was being melted into and a part of continuously evolving and floating light. It's almost like if you were a snowflake, like 20 meters above ground, and are falling. There's very little sense of gravity or time, or like, I don't know, where does your mind go when you hear that? It's almost that state. Again, very difficult to explain. I wish out of the 4 languages I spoke, there could be adjectives I could express of what that felt like in any of these languages, but it's not possible. To me, music, perhaps sound, is the closest thing that can come to expressing that transformative state, After I melted into complete light, was absorbed in light. Another moment where I don't remember visually perceiving anything happened to me. After that, I opened my eyes and I was in a green valley type of place. It was a valley, but I could see a forest around me, but I was in a more valley place. I tried to get up, and I remember clearly my Auntie Frida's voice. Auntie Frida is my favorite auntie, and in a way, I'm closer to her than I was with my mom and dad to a certain degree when I was growing up, and still continues to be that way. She called my, and she's well and alive. She's, I didn't see her, I heard her name. And from the intonation of her voice, the way she was calling me, Tatev, Tatev, you could see and feel that there was an urgency for me to go towards her voice where the call was being made. So there was nothing frantic about it, but certainly from the intonation, I could sense that I needed to go towards her voice. So I got up and started running towards her voice. As soon as I started running, Jeff, it was like, when your podcasts begin and you have this whirlpool of, it's very interesting because yours is more like a color blue, but mine was black or yeah, that speed warp when you in Star Trek, watch it, very similar to that. But I remember the distinct feeling of my entire realm that I was in being sucked into like a vacuum cleaner tube, and the distinct feeling of my falling downwards in that tube. Just I was sucked in it, and for I don't know how many seconds that was, continued to go down. And at the end of it, I opened my eyes, and I think the most unpleasant and horrifying thing happened then. Maybe like 18, 20 strangers were above my head. A man much older than me with like crooked teeth was pulling away from my face, and I was so in complete confusion. I pushed this man away. I only comprehended now, just years after, that this man was the one that gave me artificial breathing and pumped my heart and brought me back, but I pushed him really hard away from my face. And seeing the faces of strangers, I was lying down on the grass. Two gentlemen brought me down after my girlfriend screamed, and so that was really terrifying, because all these faces looked at me as though I was dead, and then the women would dip their hands in like cold bucket of water and like would slap my cheek, because my eyes kept on going back, and I kept on wanting to go back to where I was, because it was so serene and peaceful, versus this, these strangers slapping my face with cold water. That really terrified the hell out of me. And I'm told that at the time I didn't speak English. I was singing certain English songs, but I wasn't fluent or anything like that. But I'm told that I told them to get away. Like, I heard later that I said English words to tell them to get, which is really strange. I don't know anything about that, nor do I specifically remember that. But I do remember that horrified feeling of like, who are these people and what do you want from me, and why are you slapping my cheek with cold water? They were like, don't you close your eyes, little girl, don't you close your eyes. And that was so frightening. And then I thought I could stand up, so pushed people away to try to stand up, but I soaked in so much electricity, my muscles were shut. So I stood up and completely collapsed, and realized I was just serious. And there was a huge bubble that I have a big scar. I don't know if the camera will capture that, but there's a huge scar here, and there's a muscle tissue here. My finger was basically stuck, forgive me for my middle finger, but this finger was stuck here because there was no skin anymore. So for years, since I'm a pianist, I had to do exercises like this to stretch the skin so my finger could come back to its normal, because it was like stuck here. So huge bubble was in my hand, and then after a couple of days it burst, and you could see my tendons and bones, So fortunately, I suppose that also saved my life, because the electricity escaped through that wound. But yeah, that's kind of the synopsis of what happened. It was an experience that I was not able to put into words or to intellectually meddle with for about 2 years after it happened to me.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
And I think it's pretty common that, explaining their experience is very difficult for almost everybody. As a musician and a singer and a piano player, did you hear anything while you were there?
Well, my auntie's voice, the serene comfort of just the, almost like, it's interesting. I want to say something might sound insane, but again, the snowflake reference. When it's snowing, can you hear the snow? If you were in a valley of no noises, not in a city, I can almost sense the multitude of snowflakes landing, that serene, just slight little white noise of maybe even like being in water too. But as far as distinctly of what I can name as far as sound comprehensible for our mind, it was my auntie's voice. And certainly nature. I don't necessarily remember hearing birds, but nature was around me in that valley place where I opened my eyes in before I heard my auntie's voice. So yeah, like a softest, faintest little white noise / being underwater type of sounds. Yeah.
Was your auntie there with you at the lake?
No, she was not. She was not, nor did I visually see her. It was just her voice that I heard when I got up in that valley place. And as I mentioned, she's alive and well, and I love her very much, and I want her to live for a long time. But it was her voice that I heard, and her calling me back is what brought me, kind of sucked me into the tunnel of coming back to our realm here,
Was she aware of what happened to you at the time, and maybe she got some kind of premonition or something that something bad had happened to you?
Both my auntie and my mom said that they started feeling not well and really anxious and worried about, they couldn't point out what it was. They didn't even understand that it's related to me, but when I told them when I came back, when the family of my girlfriend brought me back, and we had to, of course, tell my mom what happened and so forth, both of them said that suddenly they had heart palpitations and just couldn't find their place. My mom said she was cooking in the kitchen with my other 3 sisters being at home, and she suddenly said that she just didn't feel well, couldn't really point out what it was, but she said that she had heart palpitations and was just couldn't find her place. Yeah.
Do you think that her voice calling you was a memory of her voice, or do you think possibly it was her higher self in the other realm talking to you?
I never thought about that. Jeff. I'm not sure. It could be what you say. It could also be my intertwined and complex upstairs kind of activities related to my heart and emotions, in a sense that I'm connected to my auntie, and so for her voice to have been I'm not sure. You see, never thought about that. Good question. Yeah.
Because things we talk about on this program is that you have a higher part of you in the other realm, and only a piece of you is here. So I was just wondering, maybe her higher self was aware of what happened to you and was telling you to go back.
Maybe, and it's beautiful to think about it that way. The notion of that, I feel myself, though, for me, like I can't tell you anything specific or visual like I did about this experience, but I know that I've seen and felt and lived lives before, that this is a certain, I don't know, maybe it's again part of my vibrant imagination, but everything in my life is about sevens. I was born on 1987, 7th month, on the 7th day. Certain records that I put out, which is like a random number, it's an international code for a song or something. Almost every time when I put it out to put it on Spotify or something comes with like 7 ending. These are, again, random digits that are supposed to just come whenever you press the button for that new code to be printed, so you publish a song. Anyways, a lot of sevens relate to my life in essence, and oftentimes I feel like I'm a cat on my 7th life here,
You never know. Well, do you see repeating sevens, like 777?
Yeah, I do. They surround me quite often in many forms, in many ways. Yeah.
Some people may say that that's your guardian angel reaching out to you.
Could be.
You never know.
My mama told me that I was also born in what is it called? Embryonic fluid, the pouch.
Oh yeah, you were born with.
Born in that.
My son was born that way, and
Is that
my
right?
wife has
Very
the
rare.
expression for that. I wish I can remember that expression. It's
Shapikov.
Shapikov.
Some
Yeah.
words. Yeah, Shapik is a shirt. Yeah.
But what does it
Yeah.
translate to? You used to say
born with a shirt.
born with a shirt on.
Born
Yeah.
with a shirt on. There we go.
Shirt. Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
My son was the same way. And that my wife's expression, "born with your shirt on." So
It's very rare. That's so cool. Wow. Yeah, so sevens and all that, because I often hear that that's also a sign of sorts that you are protected, or yeah.
after your NDE, for a while, were you angry or upset or disappointed that you're back here because it was so amazing over there?
Yeah, when I was closing my eyes and wanting to kind of escape back to where I was, which happened maybe like 2 times, which is why the ladies got so frustrated with me and started slapping my cheek with cold water to stay. I was frustrated. I was angry at these strangers that wanted me to come back here where my body was weak and I was confused and in pain, versus the other beautiful realm that I was in. So, but after the experience, I was scared to death about what happened to me. I couldn't properly comprehend what happened to me. And like I mentioned before too, it took me about 2 years to even start talking about it, because I didn't have the emotional or the intellectual maturity to start comprehending what was going on. I remember my mom said, go pray to God that you are back. This is a miracle, because clinically speaking, it is a miracle in the sense of also my oxygen not seeing, my brain not having oxygen for that long. Even if my heartbeat came back, I would have come back with brain damage. So it truly is, incredible that I came back normal, or maybe I have brain damage. I don't know, who knows? Yeah, this notion of my mom saying, go pray, also frustrated me after a while, because it was like this traditional go pray thing under the assumption that I'm praying to the Christian God, but there was no relevance to that. I had no connection to that, because I don't believe in religions. My God for me, the God for me is not compromised and compartmentalized in any religious forms. You know what I mean? So I was certainly a bit frustrated at my mom's request or demand to do this also, and certainly scared about what happened to me. And neurological pathways are so amazing, and memory of these senses is beyond our comprehension, in a sense that, yes, almost even after 2 years, when I would think back of the moment when I grasped the wire, it doesn't happen to me now, but all the way 2 years later, maybe even 3 years later, when I would think of the moment of grabbing the wire, for like a second or two, my body would go into that shock. It's fantastical to, I don't know how women have their second children, I don't know what that's like, but pretty miraculous that our nervous system remembers that and can duplicate that and produce that after years of it passing,
So after 2 or 3 years of it happening, what kind of conclusion or resolve did you come to this experience?
Something that I'm trying to convey till this day, something that I probably will try to explain and live and talk about and preach about till the day I die, which is that, well, first of all, that our energy, whatever we call energy, is everything, and it transforms. So we never come to a cadence where that's the end, we cadence out and that's the end. It transforms to a different type of energy. Either we have the wisdom or the intellectual capacity to understand what, I don't know, I might become a light beam of Jupiter, but we transform to something else. It's always, the energy continues to grow, which in my opinion is part of the reason why our universe keeps on expanding. And then the second thing, which is most important to me, that I'm trying to bring awareness to through all my performances, through all the translations, through all the music and the people I collaborate and work with continuously, is that it is damaging and ridiculous for us to so desperately want to give titles to things. Phenomena and things that we don't understand are damaging for our society. For example, when we say, this is of course my opinion, but I'm firm in my opinion of this, when we've created this pronoun to compromise most major religions God into, in other words, the most ultimate love we call Father in heaven, he, to me, one needs to be extremely stupid not to comprehend that many of our institutionalized struggles, one-sided waves, patriarchal, blah, 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 we complain about, non-equal pay or the abortion laws in Texas and so forth. I mean, the industry having more males. The chain of problems is endless of the things we all are suffering from, men and women. To me, it's very easy to realize that a huge part of this is in our core understanding of what pronoun we give to God through major religions. To me, it's preposterous to compromise something that we can't even comprehend into a pronoun he. It's ridiculous to me, because I don't know how much the listener, you and I, have the capacity to grasp or not, but religions, either we like it or not, either we consider ourselves to be religious or not, have penetrated themselves and sprouted their antennas into our secular and non-secular lives. So it's very damaging for us to go with notions of love, God, phenomena like that into a title of a pronoun. That's a very, very damaging thing to do for both males and females. And that's what I try to kind of teach and bring awareness to keep our mind open, so that there is a way for growth, that there's a way for connectivity. There's either it is a hurricane that we're talking about, a waveform, women and men, whatever subject, whatever phenomena it is that we're talking about. It's insane to compartmentalize it and only talk about the higher amplitude of the waveform, or just the left pole of a hurricane, or the men and the women. We need to look at things as a united one phenomena with all its opposite spectrums and poles, in order for us to have prosperity and growth.
When you went to the light, do you feel like the light itself was just like some healing light, or you were actually moving into source, or what some people may call God?
The moment I melted completely, fully with light, is when I lost visual memory until I woke up in the valley. But the second I melted, I didn't have the sense of sorts, my being able to control anything, as in like a control sense. But I was overwhelmed with this feeling that I could be and am anything and everything at the same time. Again, very high up there sounding things that are ethereal, that's hard to put into words, but I didn't sense the control of like I'm the source of God of sorts that's coming through me or something. But there was this pure, joyous, elated feeling, presence, realm, state, where I was anything and everything at the same time. I could be a tree, I could be another human being, but I was still myself, and I could be the moonlight that's shining over a dark city, or wind, or a scent. It's interesting to ponder about these things, but it's fascinating, most fascinating things. Like I want to create a music video next for one of my projects that's a small little paper boat sitting on a lake that's still, and then the wind blows this feather, and the feather comes and caresses slightly the paper boat, and the paper boat, because of this wind touching with the feather touching, starts to float, and that's starting a all of these energies. Or when I smell a scent has its memory too. So in a way, memory also is a transformative power of that same energetic source. To me, at that state when I melted off fully with the light, I could have been any and all of those at the same time. I could have been part of the wind. I could have been a scent that triggered in someone's mind a memory and brought up other feelings. And hard to explain, Jeff. You ask hard questions.
Well, speaking of memory, has the memory of this faded over the years, or is it still as real today as it was the day it happened?
As real today as it happened, as the day it happened, as it's even more embellished in my head, probably because I now know how to speak about it and have told my story a few times. It's even more vibrant. I remember it as clearly as if it were today. But the neurological experience of the pain, the physical aspect of it, has diminished. So like now thinking of holding the wire doesn't do the same to me as it did years ago, physically.
Could you say that the memory of it is inescapable? It's like you find yourself thinking about it quite often?
I do think about it quite often. Yes, it's become a huge part of what I read about, what I research, what I try to convey, what I talk about during all of my concerts. I hope I'm not annoying my audience members, but in one way, I don't tell the story of how I died, but there's this notion of union, of needing to unite together and view phenomena as a whole is my lecture of everlasting minute of every day of my life.
In what other ways do you think this experience influenced you as an artist?
Well, since I was sensing that, like in Tatev, the name that I have, which means give wings in Armenian, there's a monastery in Tatev where I was and a couple of times. And growing up in Armenia, it's a very patriarchal society. And so is here in many ways, more puritanical than, and so since I was always curious and let my mind wander from outside of the gray zone of the most traveled road, I always sensed that there was stuff that I was supposed to, compartmentalize myself as a girl, as a lady, and I was always rebellious against that. I always asked these questions about religions and why is it that way? No, I'm not going to do that, and so forth and so forth. This experience kind of even further reassured me that we are all part of one, and that I have nothing missing, and I have nothing to prove to anybody who's a male or who's my dad or who has made, there's, I don't want to go into the psychology of my childhood growing up, but there was a lot of damage done to me that I either fully digested or not, but it affected me in a certain way. Maybe I rebelled against it too much and showed like it's not affecting me, but it certainly affected me. And this experience further kind of rooted me, my belief and understanding of there not being a male deity, my not having to be feeling like I have to continuously prove myself. And I think my music and my relationship with all my collaborators kind of grew from that and keeps on growing, Have
you ever written a song about it?
Yeah, not the experience, but yeah, absolutely. I am here now, there, and everywhere you are, we're united. Yes, it's called Spring Dreams. My viewers, your viewers can go check it. It's called Spring Dreams. And we have a pretty cool music video that actually shows how the light transfers from piano to nature and back and forth. And yeah, I have a few songs written about that.
Oh, cool. As a performer, being on stage and And perhaps I wonder if you felt this. You're on stage, the band is tight, you have an amazing audience. It's like everything is just right in the music. Do you ever have a spiritual experience on stage that kind of mimics your NDE?
Yeah. I think when we began to speak right at the beginning, I said that sometimes there are glimpses of just seconds, milliseconds, where that flight or that incredible feeling of there not being gravity or time, I'm showered with it in the music in that moment where we're with the band. But it escapes. It does not last forever. But certainly, yes, music is the closest phenomena that has that transformative, transcending power, which perhaps is why, if we think about it, maybe, I don't know, maybe this could be a question for you. What brings most amount of people together? I mean, wars, religious ceremonies, and so forth worldwide. And then what else do we have? Concerts, I think. What else do we have? Am I right? Like massive amounts of people that come together.
Yeah, you're right.
Has an incredible effect, doesn't it? It literally, we're under the same wavelength when we're listening to that music. It's like the metaphoric power of sound is something that's translated into our world, but it's also something beyond and above. It's like a universe, like black hole in our Milky Way galaxy that we know very little about. We know it vibrates on B flat, 57, 59 octaves lower than the hertz of human ear are capable of hearing. So everything, every atom has its frequency and vibration. And so one would arguably say that perhaps this is why music is able to do that to us, you know, to bring tears to our eyes, to feel as though we are flying, to feel as though there is no time, to be rid of anxiety, to control our heartbeat, to so much.
Do you fear death at all?
No, not at all. Physical death of it? No, I don't mean to sound like I'm still gonna not want to be physically hurt. I will do everything to not feel that. But the emotional, intellectual, kind of psychological capacity of what fear death might be associated with, I don't have it at all.
If you had a friend that lost someone dear to them, and they were, you know, wondering if their loved one was okay on the other side and having their own existential crisis, what kind of advice would you give them?
Oh, I would certainly share that moment when I was telling you, when I first blacked out and physiologically couldn't handle the pain and felt this amazing state realm when I appeared in, and when I was telling you that the only bad feeling was that how can I find a way to tell my peeps that I'm better than they are? I would explain that moment in a very detailed manner to the person who's suffering, because they are in a much better, elusive, flexible, and flowy and anxiety-less place than we are. So I would tell them to truly be peaceful and calm, and to, if tears come, that's all right, but to never be squished in your heart thinking that they died and they're not well and they ended of sorts. There's no such thing. It's continuous evolving energy and flow and existence.
Would you say that we just transition from this state to another state of being?
Yeah. Maybe not even to another state of being, but different plateaus of existence. You know, it's like a cyberspace of. So maybe it's not like this vertical or like not vertical type of different realm or horizontal, but more able to feel the intertwined relationship of different realms, more that, you know, might be a bit more complex than saying, now I'm in dream state, now I'm in spirit state, now I'm in, you know what I mean? Because there is a way to kind of sense other places at the same time too, and hear other things too. Like when I was leaving my body and I told you I was seeing my girlfriend screaming, at that time I was also able to see and sense other things. Like my sister, I can't tell you what she was doing, but I sensed my sister there. I also sensed the inevitable power of the light that was melting me into itself at the same time. And these are either I can explain with words or not. To me, they're different realms, different energetic places that were like being like a spider web intertwining, and too complex for me to even comprehend myself, let alone to explain with any human-made language.
After your experience, did you notice you had any increased cognitive ability, which some people may consider even like psychic abilities?
I wish immediately after that, if I were to appear in New York City, perhaps I would tell you the answer to that a bit more. Why I'm saying that is because not much drastic change happened during the next few years after that happened to me, as far as where I was living and so forth. If I appeared in New York with diverse type of emotions, feelings, constantly different places to be in, maybe I'd be able to answer that question better. But one thing is for sure, like I have this, but I can't tell you if I didn't have that before, but I know I have it now. When I walk on the street, I can sense like, and there, I live in New York City. I'm a lady who, is a night owl. I've been walking around in Harlem at 3, 4 a.m.s, and I've been in places and scenarios where most people would think that a girl shouldn't be in at that time of the hour. But I can sense like who is going to harm me or not. Don't want to sound very abstract. I can bring in specific examples, but I have this extra sense of feeling like who's going to harm me, even if the people have a pistol in their pocket, they might not be the one who's going to make an action with that. So I have this very like confident stride whenever I feel safety. But then there are times where I feel danger. And it's interesting. I'll just talk about maybe one small example of a couple of years ago, going up the stairs on a subway platform. I think it was Broadway Junction to connect to the L train or something. And I could hear this loud screaming / singing voice of a man. And he was this haphazard, he was eating a hot dog, had certainly some kind of a mental disorder for sure. There was something not properly put together. He was eating a hot dog and was spilling on himself, and he was frantically looking for eye contact from people. And in New York, we're all in our bubbles because that's the way it has to be. Otherwise we'll go cuckoo if we're always accepting and getting all these energies from everyone. But this man was in a frantic manner looking for someone to kind of pay attention to him, to make sure that someone was hearing his singing. And all that was happening around him was just people going away, not giving any contact. I climbed up on the top of the subway plateau where he was, and instead of going this way or that way, I just stood in front of him, and he was singing, I think, Stevie Wonder's "You Are the Sunshine of My Life," and I just smiled when he sang. He paused for a moment, gave me a smile back, and then he cleaned himself, did this, and walked away. Complete change about the way his hand movements, and the insane type of singing, loud berserk, or the fact that he was eating in a weird way. And just 2 seconds, that's all it took for me to look into his eyes. He calmed down. This insane movement stopped immediately. He calmed down, smiled at me, and then peacefully walked away. It was, to me, it was very sweet, clear moment that I sensed that he just wanted to know that he was being listened to, that his singing was being heard. That's all, and he calmed down. So I have that feeling oftentimes when I'm walking on the street of like who's messed up or who's wanting attention and what can calm people down. And I guess being present is what I'm saying. You know, I can sense when to be fully present, which I try to do most of the time.
After watching this podcast, people may want to reach out to you and ask you questions or chit chat with you. Are you open to that? And if so, how can they reach you?
Gladly. Yes, I am myself intensely looking for as many connections as possible with people. That's one of my prerogatives and missions in life. So my website is Tatev, Tatev, sound.com. I'm also on Instagram, Tatev Sound, Spotify, my music is there, and on YouTube as well. I'd immensely appreciate if people connected me on YouTube and subscribed, because I occasionally put out a lot of interesting kind of documentary type videos that I produce myself, in addition to, of course, music videos and this program I created called Mikatorhaiden, a piece of Armenian, which teaches Armenian to English speakers also. So I'd love to connect. And of course, my email too, certainly they can reach out to. It also is tatevsound@gmail.com, and I'll gladly connect.
So your YouTube channel is also called Tatev Sound?
Yeah, well, it's just Tatev, but since there's a famous monastery and a village in Armenia, if you type Tatev, the first things that pop out is about Tatev. So one needs to type Tatev Sound until I become very famous, and then I'll be the only Tatev, probably.
What was the name of that song you were singing earlier? And so they can find that on YouTube?
Oh, yes. Spring Dreams. And it's precisely what we spoke about. I wrote the song about how energies can transfer from one form, one way of being into another, and music having that transcending power to kind of translate the energetic flow of it all. Spring Dreams, it's called, and it's on YouTube. Yes, I'd appreciate all comments and views.
Great. All right, Tatev, well, before we finish up, can you leave us with one last positive message?
Young generation has all the secrets. Let them continue having the curiosity that they need to explore the world. Let's not compromise their imagination. Whoever came up with that expression, curiosity killed the cat, must have been a really boring bastard. Curiosity is the way to heal and change and transform. So my positive note would be that we should all be enticed to be more curious, so that we create more synaptic and the neurological connections between our left and right hemisphere, which will change the world. So we have the power. Let's prosper instead of growing. I think we've grown enough. We need to prosper now. That's my message.
Well, thank you for that message. And thank you again for being my guest today. I appreciate you, and I wish you massive success in whatever you're doing.
I wish you the same. Thank you so much for your time and this open conversation. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.